Hello everyone. Good evening. Hello everyone. Good evening. Can we all hear me? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to class. Thank you so much for joining. For both mentors and mentees in session. We expect to have a full class soon. Welcome to our mentors for joining in. Thank you so much, our mentors, for joining in for today's session. We'll be commencing right about now. We are currently in week 5 of the JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship program for data privacy and protection. So far, we have run through different, from week 1, we've had the opportunity to run through, the different aspects of data privacy and protection. We've gone through, introduction to data privacy and protection, data breach management, data collection, processing and transfer. We talked about data subject rights and so forth and so forth. So forth. Right. And today in class, we'll be discussing navigating the roles of a data protection officer. Right. So I'm sure that our mentors are ready to, you know, take us through this journey. I'm also sure that the mentees are willing to come along with us as we push through. So not to waste any further time, I would like to introduce the mentors we'll be having in today's session. Firstly, we are going to be having um, Mr. Solomon Okedara. Mr. Solomon Okedara, I won't be reading his profile, seeing that we've done that subsequently in other classes, and he has been with us in for I think 2 or 3 classes thereabouts. So Mr. Solomon Okedara is going to be one of our mentors for today. Another mentor that we expect in today's class is Mr. Ridwan Badmos. Mr. Ridwan Badmos, another mentor that has been with us, I think, in one of our classes. Thirdly, another mentor that we are expecting in today's class is Mr. Emmanuel Iwere. Mr. Emmanuel is a mentor that we are all very familiar with. I am sure that when he comes on board, he'll be doing well to share his insights and knowledge into today's topic. Okay, we have also on call Mr. Matthew Saisi. Mr. Matthew was with us in the last class. Thank you so much, sir, for joining. We're happy to have you once again with us in today's session. And last but not least, we have a new mentor for today, right? That is in the person of Daniel Chibike Okoro. Mr. Daniel is a legal professional renowned for his expertise in technology law and corporate finance. His distinctive edge lies in his specialization in venture capital, where he has demonstrated a profound understanding of the challenges and opportunities within this dynamic ecosystem, advising startups, entrepreneurs, and investors. Daniel navigates financial structures, conducts due diligence, and remains attuned to ever-evolving startup landscape. What sets Daniel apart is not only his technical acumen, but also his proactive and client-centric approach, committed to delivering tailored legal solutions. He aligns his strategies with clients' business objectives. Daniel contributes his abilities to articulate complex legal concepts in a clear and accessible manner. Daniel brings a rich academic and professional background to his practice. He As he marks his milestone in the legal profession, Daniel continues to be a trusted advisor at the intersection of technology, corporate finance, and venture capital. Thank you so much, Mr. Daniel, for joining. I can see you're already on the call. You are welcome officially to the JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship program. So we will not be wasting any time. The way class is going to be going in today's session is that, like we normally do have, we'll be having presentations from our mentors, and then after our mentors are done presenting, 20 minutes each for their presentation. We'll be taking presentation from the mentees. We would have 10 minutes for mentees presentation for both groups. We would have feedbacks from the mentors. After we're done with feedbacks, then we'll go into our question and answer, take pictures, and we'll call it a wrap on class. So not to waste any time, I'll first like to invite Mr. Daniel Okoro for his discourse in today's class. You're welcome. You're very, very much welcome, sir. We are happy to have you in today's session. Like I said, we'll be discussing the essential roles of a data protection officer. Thank you so much, Mr. Daniel.
Thank you so much, Dennis. I'm super excited to be here, and I I hope you know. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, yeah. So once again, thank you guys for having me here. I'm super excited to be here. I saw some of my mentors on the list of mentees, so I'm privileged to be able to do this. I remember back then when I started my career, I always try out much as possible to learn from webinars like this. And right now, I'm being able to give back. It's such an honor. And thank you guys again for having me here. So today I'll be very quick. My presentation is very, very straightforward. I understand that, you know, the mentees are going to give presentation, 10 minutes and whatnot. So we'll get more of the time during question and answer. So I'm tasked with discussing data protection regulations, the essential role of the data protection officer. Um, I'll start off with the Flutterwave story. So I don't know if you guys remember back then when Flutterwave had a data breach of about 7.2 million US dollars. That's approximately 11 billion naira. Why that happened was because they didn't have a detailed data privacy framework. Frameworks like that ensures that there is a dedicated personnel to ensure monitoring of the system, to ensure that there is a policy to prevent weak access control, as well as reporting incident breach to regulators. So not only did Flutterwave lose the amount of money, they were also fined by the regulator for non-compliance. So what is the purpose of DPOs? DPOs not just ensure compliance, they avoid legal risks, avoid financial penalties, as well as reputational harm. So I went on to saying that data protection has become a critical issue globally as business and individuals increasingly rely on digital platforms for financial transactions, communications, and service delivery. The rise of cyber threats, data breaches, and stringent regulations have made safeguarding personal information a top priority. Personal information is any information that would identify an individual coming from like information such as your IP you're using to join this call, your name, your password, your email. Those are informations that are required for you to use services online. So at the same time that these platforms, these data controllers are accepting this data, regulators are worried that most of these data controllers would abuse it as well as bad actors. So that's why regulations such as data protections are coming up with policies to ensure that the fundamental right of privacy is being respected by every actor in the digital space. So I went on to give it insights about data. So the world generates about 328 million terabyte daily. That's a lot of data. I don't know if you guys understand the hierarchy of data. One 1024 kilobyte makes up 1 megabyte, so and so on forth. It goes on to 1024 gigabyte makes up 1 terabyte. So imagine where a day we create about 327 million terabytes. That's a lot of data, and that's a lot of, personal information spreading across. Um, Let me even give you in perspective. WhatsApp alone generates about 2 million messages are sent daily on WhatsApp. So those are a lot of, data going around the globe. In 2023, there were 6.41 million data records being exposed worldwide. These kind of records, if they have the dedicated DPOs, I'm sure this number will reduce. This is a lot of number for, like, for records, sensitive data to be exposed. Also, the average cost of data breach in 2024 was $4.48 million globally, because some of these data controllers are not compliant. That's why it doesn't take time for the regulators to issue fines, to issue penalties for non-compliance. So what are the government doing to ensure that data controllers and data processors are respecting individual rights? So for the GDPR, they fine they fine as high as 20 million pounds or 4% of the annual revenue for non-compliance. Similarly, the Nigerian Data Protection Act can fine as much as 10 million naira or 2% of the annual revenue. So I moved on to, giving an overview of the Nigerian Data Protection. The Nigerian Data Protection Act, that's NDP, was signed into law June 12, and it replaces the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation. I was privileged to be in practice when the Nigerian data protection was the only regulation we had on data protection in Nigeria. So I remember back then in limited Babalada, where we, if we wanted to, like, file cases to see if individuals or corporate has standing, we would go to the Nigerian data protection regulation to get to see the principles and apply it accordingly. So right now, it's a new phase, an exciting era where we have the Act, and the Act provide for regulatory authority. It generated the regulatory authority, which is known as the Data Protection Commission, NDPC. So why was it introduced? Every now and then there are innovations, every now and then there are tech startups being developed. So because of the growing digital economy and increase in data processing, personal data processing, and also because as much as we are giving in our data, there are also guys out there, I'll call them hackers, trying to take advantage of these data. That's why you see a lot of increase in data breaches, and as well as cyber threats. Also, another reason why the act was introduced was to align Nigeria with global data protection standards. This is more of a cross-border issue because jurisdiction will be hesitant in sharing to another jurisdiction where they don't have adequate data protection laws or regulation. So that's why Nigeria needed to, have an act to ensure that cross-border transfers are being respected and reciprocated. Another issue or reason why the Nigerian Data Protection Act was um, enacted was to strengthen compliance requirement for organization handling sensitive data. Sensitive data has been defined to include your financial statement, your health records, among others. Like in Western part of the world, it includes your sexual orientation, your political opinion, and whatnot. So compliance with such informations are very, very critical in data processing organizations. So I moved on to, discussing some of the key provisions of the Act. One of them is the establishment of the Nigerian Data Protection Commission. That commission oversees data protection, compliance, and enforcement. Another provisions for the Act was it gives a lot of obligations for data controllers and processors. So I said organization must comply with strict data handling. For example, data breach notification. So wherever there's been a breach, because data DPOs are expected to create policies to avoid breach. But sometimes with the right policies in place, hackers, they are also smart. They know how to like maneuver such policies. So wherever such incident happen, the act provides that within a stipulated time, let's say 24 of 72 hours, they are expected to notify the data subjects as well as the regulator. so that they to avoid fines from them. Another reason for the application is the data security and protective measures. This is more important for data controllers that handle sensitive data. So under provisions for the NDPA is the data subject right. Individuals have right over their personal data. For example, right to erasure or education of data. Whenever you see informations that are not being corrected about you, you have the right to rectify. Sometimes if you want to delete an app, you have the right for your information to be erased completely from the site. TikTok has that feature, Facebook has that feature and whatnot. So these are rights that people don't know, but it has to be provided for by the NDPA. Also, you have rights object wherever they ask not for them not to sell your personal information to third parties, or if you're not comfortable with the way third parties are processing your data, you can object to it. So another provision is mandatory data protection officers. So these are required for companies that receive about 200 data subjects monthly or daily. So there was a recent regulation from NDPC that gave the threshold for data processing organization. So for like major data processing ultra high level, um, it's for data processing organization that receive data above 5,000 data subject within 6 months. And that for extra high level is for data controllers that receive data subject of 1,000 and above within 6 months. Another issue, like I said, is the cross-border data transfer. Jurisdictions are hesitant in sharing data to other jurisdictions that don't have compliance in place, that don't have adequate data protection law in place. So NDPA seek to address that issue so that wherever people from Europe, the United States are trying to transfer data to Africa or Nigeria, they are able to do that with relaxed mind and knowing that they are compliant and there are adequate measures put in place to protect the data. So the provisions of NDP also provide for non-compliance, penalty for non-compliance. Like I said earlier, the fine can go as high as 10 million naira or 2% of the annual income. So some of the key responsibilities of the data protection officer includes obviously ensuring compliance. The DPO is responsible for ensuring that organizations comply with the NDPA, excuse me, relevant data privacy instrument and data protection directive. Another key responsibility is training and awareness. This cannot be overemphasized because yes, DPUs are experienced to come up with policies, but who actually control and handle this data? Those are the employees of the organization, such as the IT guy, the product guy, and whatnot. So it's important that these employees are trained on how to comply with the policies of data privacy or data protection. So that's why I said, for example, privacy by design. Whenever I work in a team that innovative every other time. So whenever they come up with idea, I'm telling them, oh, what are the privacy concerns concerning this product you're doing? So we don't wait till you develop the product. I tend to tell them, oh, have this in mind. You're collecting this data. How long are you keeping this data? What are you using this data for? So these are awareness. These are training that I do every time within the startup to ensure that they have privacy wherever they are coming up with ideas, wherever they are coming up with products to release in the market. Another responsibility for DPOs is um, creating of data protection impact assessment form. This is more of a form to identify and mitigate potential risks associated with data processing activities. So the form contains information like how long are you maintaining this data you're receiving, what is the purpose of receiving this personal data, how do you tend to store them? So if a data privacy officer can identify all these issues and answer the questions, like, give to the employer that are working on data to identify these problems, they are able to mitigate and reduce potential risks, associated with data processing. Lastly, the the DPO serve as a contact point between the organization and the regulator, that's the NDPC. Qualifications of data protection officer. So I said that basically anyone can be a data protection officer, but it's more advantageous for law graduate because we understand the law, and then it's more of creating policies, ensuring compliance and whatnot. So people from tech backgrounds, people from any other field can be DPOs, but the major thing is that you need to understand data protection regulations. Those are what you need to understand. And how can you do that? By attending webinars on data protection, taking online certifications and whatnot. So another added advantage, under certification that is very reliable and used by most of data privacy enthusiasts or professionals is the certification by the International Association of Privacy Professionals. That's the yes, CIPP. So this CIPP have certification for different jurisdictions, but most commonly we have for Europe and we have for the United States. So if you're as curious as I am, you could also take some certification on cybersecurity. You don't need to have any tech background. You just need to be passionate or be really interested about it, because sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, it gets boring. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh yeah. So it gets very boring if you're not really passionate about it. So you could take courses from several from CompTIA and also Google cybersecurity certifications. What are the challenges that we experience at DPOs is, lack of awareness. There are enough information going around. It's just a few people that are interested in this field because this is an emerging area of law. And also, a lot of organizations have been in existence before data protection became mainstream. So it is it is very difficult for them to, adhere to the new compliance requirement of the regulators. That's why most of times they receive personal data, or they receive data and they don't adequately protect it, and it leads to breach and they are fined. So these are common challenges we see with some organizations. What are the best practices? One of them is continuous training, and that one is fostering a culture of compliance. I'll say this, just like the way we have Intellectual Property Day, um, I think Privacy Day is on January 28th. When does this come? We need to, I'm talking to, I believe most people here are, data protection enthusiasts. Um, they, it's important to create awareness, to join the movement to ensure that data protection is respected. Data privacy is respected across, from data organizations to even um to companies, to governments and whatnot. So ensuring awareness would, help and bring data protection to the front line, as we all envisage. And that best practice is to ensure that audits are adherence to the data protection regulations. So I concluded by saying that the role of DPO is significant in ensuring data protection compliance in Nigeria. By understanding the responsibilities, qualification, and challenges associated with this role, organizations can effectively implement data protection measures and safeguard personal information. So like I said earlier, data protection officers don't just ensure compliance, they mitigate risks, legal risks, avoid legal financial penalties and reputational harm. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you guys for listening.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Daniel, for your very interesting presentation. It was really nice getting to hear from you, and seeing you put a slide or a presentation for us. We really, really, really do appreciate. And I trust our mentees on the call, were able to pick up from some of what you shared in this session. So please, we'll be having Mr. Matthew next for his own discourse on today's topic. But I would like to kindly ask the mentees to also prepare, ahead or prepare, just get ready for your presentation so that when when Mr. Matthew is done, then we can take your presentation. So Mr. Matt, over to you. Thank you so much for joining.
Hello, moderator. Good to be here. Hello to all the mentees. It's always a pleasure. I'd ask just maybe that you flag me for time. I can see we're already deep into a quarter of the time allocated. Can I just thumbs up that you can hear? Go ahead.
You can go for 20 minutes, sir.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so no slides. So what's the question? What's the problem question here? It's navigating data protection regulations, the role of a DPO. When you look at that topic, immediately you are led in two directions, which is one, duties and responsibilities as a data protection officer, but overall in the context of navigating data protection law and regulation. Okay. And I basically thought about it in two ways. You could probably try and say, overall, you're trying to do two things, which is to understand the broader governance requirements that legislation imposes and operationalizing the law into your organization or your firm or your partnership, because essentially a data protection officer is going to sit inside of a company. But sometimes you may be a lawyer in a country that allows for you to have a data protection officer as a service. So you've outsourced, maybe you sit in a law firm, and because you handle a certain company's tax obligation or intellectual property outfit, they tell you, why don't you act as our data protection officer, which is allowed. So you have that distinction. Places like South Africa, you need to be a member of the board, you need to be senior employed. Places like even here in the UK, you can actually outsource. So when you're looking at the governance obligations, or when you're trying to navigate the governance requirements of the data protection regulations and laws, you're going to look at a couple of elements. I'll just give us a few here. One, you're going to look at your registration requirements. So obviously, where there's a data protection law, there's a regulator. In most cases, that'll be independent. In some cases, that may be an outfit within the central government, maybe like in the Middle East, where it's Ministry of, Corporate Affairs or Internal Ministry, something like that. So you're looking at registration. You're going to think around, do I need to register? Do I need to register across multiple categories? Do I want to register as a processor? Do I want to register as a controller? Do I need to do both? You're also going to look at the reporting requirements. So in some countries, you have a duty to report on a monthly basis. Most often in conservative countries in Southeast Asia, in India, for example, they've ring-fenced financial data where you have to report before you make transfers. Some countries like Turkey, if you find yourself maybe registering as a controller in Turkey, the registration process is slightly different because they'll ask you exactly what are you doing, what categories of personal data do you process, tell us every single time you process them, give us a monthly report. Whereas in countries, let's say in the EU, for example, or the UK, they'll just ask you to keep your own record of processing and just register with them so that they can have your contact at hand and know who they can talk to when they need to. In the US, you wouldn't have any sort of reporting obligations or registration. Then you want to look at your responsibility and accountability. And two factors play a key role there. One is going to be the organizational model. So you maybe work for a company that's maybe a subsidiary of a organization which is headquartered in Europe, for example, and they have a Nigerian branch and a Kenyan branch, etc. So you may think maybe I've registered with the NDPC, that's enough. It may be that, probably you want to register in Nigeria, you want to register in the UK, and you also want to register in Europe. Now, certain legislations, so for example, under the GDPR, there's something called a one-stop shop, which essentially means if you have a organization which is spread out across multiple countries in the EU, then you can assign one country where your main processing occurs, and appoint that as your lead sort of DPO, where your DPO sits, and they can contact every other regulator. For example, in Asia, I think they're going to bring in the same thing under the ASEAN model. You may want to assign your main seat. So you need to think about the way your organization is structured, how your data moves across the different entities within your organization. Secondly, you want to look at the applicable laws and the jurisdictions in which they apply. So certain countries, excuse me for that, sorry. Certain countries will have what we call an extraterritorial scope. And an extraterritorial scope essentially means that the law is applicable even outside the borders of that country. So that may apply to very many different legislations, which are especially those that are modeled on the GDPR, because it means essentially you may want to give a heads up to different regulators, even if, let's say, for example, you're primarily processing in Nigeria, but say, for example, you're processing the personal data of EU citizens or EU persons, they don't say citizens, then you may want to give a heads up to the regulator to say, hey, by the way, we fall under the ambit of the GDPR, so here's a under our responsibility, we're going to register with you. So you're thinking about that in terms of governance, how your organization is structured, who you need to register with, who you need to be making reports into. And reports here could be reports about breaches, reports about ongoing processing, but also asking for advice. So most countries will have a regulator where you can put in questions and say, hey, I'm unclear. Does recorded phone conversations into the customer service hotline classify as personal data? Do I have a duty to disclose those? You can ask the regulator. The regulator may say, no, actually, they were on the call with you. They should have that. You don't need to disclose that under a subject access request. Or they may say, yeah, that's personal data. You need to disclose it. Okay. Now, the most important bit now, so we've looked at the two parts. We're looking at two parts of a question, which is navigating the data protection regulations and the role of a DPO. So that first part is navigating the DP regulations. The second part is the role of a DPO. So your role as a data protection officer generally will be to try and communicate that entire environment and that entire bucket of responsibilities and obligations to the business or to your clients. If you look in sort of the preamble or the initial text, or even the way the text is worded, most data protection regulation requires a risk-based approach, with the minor exception of the United States. You're going to look at a risk-based approach because the law is, most laws are drafted now to be future-proof. So they will say, well, if things change, you need to change with them. And broadly, the most effective way of communicating that is by speaking the language of risk. So what are the risks as a lawyer or as a DPO who maybe has to have that understanding of legal risk? What are the risks that come about as a result of data protection law? Okay, so you've got 5 categories of risk you want to think about and communicate to your business in various ways. You have criminal risk. Now, depending on the country you're in, or depending on how you may be, exposed, there may be criminal risk that attaches with flouting data protection laws. So it's very possible that somebody is a bad actor within an organization. Somebody steals some information about drugs, drug testing, criminal records data, and uses that in a way that's unfounded. It's very possible that under data protection law, especially if you're in the Middle East, that someone within your organization who bears responsibility could be prosecuted, right? And it's also possible that many times data protection law is going hand in hand with things like the Computer Misuse Act, financial crime, things of that nature. So you're trying to look for areas where the business and particularly the data controller within your organization, so maybe the CTO, the CFO, the CEO, is exposed to criminal risk arising from breach of data protection law. That's usually the highest category of risk that you may want to root out, explain, and mitigate. Then you have civil risks. Most laws allow for data subjects to sue or to bring claims where they feel that your lack of adherence to data protection law has caused some kind of harm, some kind of loss. And that maybe looks at things like class action lawsuits. So the most famous one being like Morrison's here in the UK, where, for example, an auditor was hired to audit the book of Morrison's being one of the largest supermarket chains in the UK. The auditor, feeling he had been fired unfairly, decided to take a drive, put it into the computers of Morrison's, and then steal a bunch of personal information, things like salary, etc., etc. Now, the implications of this was that, Morrison's was not doing particularly well, but this individual was able to leak information about senior individuals being paid very high amounts of money in terms of salary and bonuses, and caused quite a stir. Now, what happened is that everyone who was affected banded together and sued Morrison's, basically saying, hey, we feel, our rights have been infringed. Now, in this case, the court took a very conservative view and said, look, even though, yes, it's true, your data was breached, you need to show the harm that was caused to you as a result of that breach. It can't just be that, your rights have been breached, therefore you're entitled to compensation. Essentially, you need to show the standard of harm, the degree of harm caused by the ineffectiveness of the organization, even though, yes, they were lax in protecting the information. No one should be able to just insert a drive and disappear. So those kinds of risks are risks you want to sort of mitigate and explain to the business. Now, thirdly, you have regulatory risks, not lastly. Regulatory risks are the obvious risks that we all know of, which essentially means sanctions which could be imposed by regulators or governments, fines, enforcement actions, penalty notices, audit notices, compliance notices. Those are generally things now we've come to see, we've come to know of. So we talked in the beginning about operationalizing data protection regulations for your organization. At this point, you also want to think about the reason it's important to know your jurisdiction and the size of your organization is that you may also be subject to sectoral regulation. So, for example, if you're operating in the US, there's sector-specific regulation around healthcare information, education information under a different act. In certain states like New York, there are financial acts like the Graham-Bleach Lively Act. There's there's acts protecting children online. So you see, that kind of thing is very important when you're trying to understand the requirements that you need to adhere to. So regulatory risk, very important. You have operational risk. Operational risk is essentially risk that risks the operations of the business, the core workings of the business. So say, for example, you work for a company which does HR software, right? Ideally, essentially, the core business of your organization is processing personal data. It's going to have health and safety records, training, next of kin, disability information in there. You're going to have information about people's pensions and who their beneficiaries are. Any sickness they may have, it's going to have a bunch of information there. Right? Now, if your servers are compromised in terms of a data breach, then you have obligations to shut down, investigate, and remediate. What does that mean for your core business? There's a huge operational risk there in that, hey, we can't charge our clients. Our clients may leave, right? Because we're supposed to be a trusted HR software. DPO, why didn't you tell us this was a risk we needed to mitigate, right? Why didn't you work with the production guys to say we need to have 2 different guys doing our servers, or maybe segment our data so that if one is compromised, the other one is okay, and we can give assurances to our clients without having to shut down operations. And lastly, you have that reputational risk. Reputational risk generally tends to be the least in terms of risky. There's a big appetite for reputational risk, but it is a risk nevertheless. So, for example, you may have seen that breach with Ashley Madison, the dating site for people who are married. So essentially a site dedicated to discreet affairs. People wanted to cheat on their partners. They were on this website. Huge data breach. It's very unlikely anyone will ever sign up to that website again. And I think it doesn't probably exist. The reputational risk was way too high. Even it ruined marriages. It became synonymous with, people who are up to nefarious things, right? So there you have it. That is the 2 different aspects of navigating data protection laws, specifically as a data protection officer. Now, how do you go about doing this? You essentially, as a DPO, want to build a data protection framework or a data protection management program within your company. There's a lot of things that go into baking that. Network cutoff. I didn't get the first type. The first type of risk is criminal risk. How do you do that? So when you're building a data protection framework or data protection management program, one thing is you want to make sure you're doing adequate audit and assurance work. Whether it's at the very beginning, you want to do a gap analysis or maturity analysis or an audit to identify where all your gaps are across the different applicable components. You want to be doing your impact assessments, your DPIAs, as the first speaker mentioned. You want to be doing DPIAs, PIAs, LIAs, legitimate interest assessments, TIAs, transfer impact assessments, where you're transferring data, maybe into North Korea. You want to make sure you've done a transfer impact assessment. You want to look at your synergies within the business. Who are your key stakeholders? You want to be working with information security. You want to be working with HR. Is your role going to be focused purely on working with your customer service team to deal with data subjects' rights? So you want to get those people aligned. You want to work out who your allies are within the business and how you're going to navigate that. You want to look at assigning roles and responsibilities. So through policy work, maybe you want to say, whenever there's a data breach, CEO needs to be informed. Roles and responsibilities generally is through a RACI matrix. So responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Okay. So Are you working with the legal department to address any of the risks we've talked about? Do they need to be responsible? Who signs off and says this is good to go? This impact assessment we have done is okay for me. Is it you? Is it the CEO? Is it the owner of the system or record? Then you're also responsible for awareness within your privacy management program. Training is very important. Privacy and data protection is as big a compliance issue as it is a cultural issue, okay? Depending on the maturity levels that you have. So you're primarily the key champion for data privacy within and promoting that culture within your organization through training. You could have lunch and learns, etc., etc. And then lastly, strategic influence, exerting that strategic influence, communicating the different risks to the business, whether you're working with your internal audit to make sure that there are controls in place which are reviewed, reporting into senior management, what they need to be aware of, regulatory forecasting, etc., etc. So in a nutshell, that's how I think the presentations should be looking. And that's a quick flavor of navigating data protection regulations, the role of a DPO. Let's leave it there.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Matthew, for everything that you've shared so far. So far, we just have 2 mentors on the call. I'm not sure if we'll be having anyone joining, but if we do, we would kindly notify the class and then we can receive presentation of those mentors as we move on subsequent class. But right now, what we'll be doing is that we'll be going straight to Mentee's presentation. So group 1, please let's have the presentation, and then so please also get ready. We'll be taking your presentation soon, right? So group 1, please let's have a presentation, 10 minutes, if you can. Okay, I assume Deborah, you're the one taking the presentation, right? Group presenter for group 1, please, we're expecting your presentation. Can we have that as quick as possible? Okay.
Sorry, please. I'm trying to share my screen. Please just give me like a minute.
All right, no problem.
Okay. So good evening, everybody. Yes. I'm group 1 data protection presenter for today, and we'll be looking at the essential role of a data protection officer. Please, I hope you all can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Okay, so the role of a data protection officer. The Nigerian Data Protection Act provides for the role of a data protection officer. However, we'll be considering 4 different roles because their roles are multifaceted. They have plenty roles to play in an organization. So the first role will be monitoring compliance. As our speaker earlier said, the role of the data protection officer is to ensure that the organization adhere to different data protection regulation governing that particular country. So for example, like in Nigeria, we have the Nigeria Data Protection Act, we have the Nigeria Data Protection Regulation, and other laws regulating data privacy and protection. Hence, it's the role of the data protection officer to ensure that organizations adhere to the laws provided for in that country. Also, they conduct audits. The data protection officer is required to provide annual reports of his work in the organization every year to the management. Is meant to like submit an annual report generally of what he has done for the organization. So he conducts audits, he provides training for employees in the organization. Data protection best practices entails that employees in the organization or employees in an organization are updated on recent data protection laws and different policies and practices that they can employ. So the data protection officer provides this training for employees in an organization. And the fourth point here would be managing data breaches. So whenever a breach occurs, it is the role of the data protection officer to minimize the risk, minimize the risks and breaches as much as possible. Yes, he minimizes the risks. He tackles any kind of data breach problem that may occur in the organization. So we'll be moving on to the importance of compliance and enforcement. We cannot overemphasize the importance of complying with data protection regulations. The Nigerian Data Protection Act, I think specifically Section 49, provides for penalties if you fail to obey these data protection laws. Failure to appoint a data protection officer can result in a fine of 10 million naira or 2% of their annual proceeds. So it is very important for organization to appoint a data protection officer and comply with the data protection laws available. We'll be looking at when is the role of a data protection officer required. Section 32 of the Nigerian Data Protection Act states that it mandates data controllers of major importance to have a designated data protection officer in its employ. Hence, it can be concluded that only data controllers of major importance are obligated to have a DPO. The pressing question is, what then makes an organization a data controller of major importance? Because now the Act provides that data controllers of major importance are mandated, they're obligated to have a DPO. So what kind of organization do we classify as an organization that requires this data protection officer? From Section 65 of the Nigerian Data Protection Act, we see three factors, a requirement to know that, okay, this organization is a data controller of major importance, and as such, they are mandated to have a DPO. Number one is that they process the personal data of over 200 people within 6 months. Number two, they offer ICT service on digital devices that store personal data of people. And number three, if they work in certain key industries like finance, aviation, communication, health, power, etc. So out of these three factors, the basic factor would be if they process personal data of over 200 people within a period of 6 months. Any organization processing that large amount of data is mandated by law to have a data protection officer. Also, with reference to other jurisdictions, Article 37 of the European Union General Data Processing Regulation sets out guidelines for when a DPO must be appointed. So under the EU, the guideline must be that number one, the processing is carried out by a public authority or body, except for courts acting in their judicial capacity. So when the processing of personal data is carried out by a public authority or a body, they are mandated to have a data protection officer. Secondly, The core activities of the controller or the processor consist of processing operation, which by virtue of their nature, their scope, or their purposes require regular and systematic monitoring of data subjects on a large scale. So when they process personal data of large scale of a large scale of people, just like the way Nigerian Data Protection Act provides for 200 people within a space of 6 months. When the company or the organization process large amount of personal data, they are mandated to have a data protection officer under the European Union. And the third one is the core activities of the controller or the processor consist of processing on a large scale of special categories of data pursuant to Article 9 or personal data relating to criminal conviction and offenses referred to in Article 10. Terry, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I think my network is misbehaving, but okay, assessing the need for a data protection officer in different organizations. So we will assess whether or not an organization actually needs a data protection officer. We'll look at the legal requirement from the European Union General Data Protection Regulation and other laws. We see that if it's a public authority or a body, except a court acting in their judicial capacity, if it's a public authority or a body processing this data, they require a data protection officer. Two, if they engage in large-scale systematic monitoring of individual, example, online behavior tracking, CCTV surveillance, etc., they require a data protection officer. And the third one will be processing special categories of data or criminal record on a large scale. When they process information relating to health data, biometric data, or probably criminal offenses, they require a data protection officer. Also, we look at the industry-specific consideration to know what kind of industry are mandated to have a data protection officer. We look at the healthcare and life sciences. So when they process health data, these healthcare industries like the hospitals, insurance companies, they process this health data, they are required to have data protection officer. Secondly, banking and finance. This industry is banking and finance, tech and digital service, and retail and e-commerce. They are mandated to have a data protection officer. We also look at the organization size and data volume to determine whether or not they require a data protection officer. And if these organizations, they handle large amount of personal data, by law, they are required to have a data protection officer. But if on the other hand, they handle small scale of data, they will not be mandated to have, it will be optional for them to have a data protection officer. Then we have the risk management and compliance. If an organization frequently processes personal data across multiple jurisdictions, the appointment of a DPO becomes very crucial. So the IFS speaker talked about cross-border transfer. It is very important to have a data protection officer to regulate data.
We can't hear you.
Education and skills for a data. Sorry, can you?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Can you all hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. Okay, sorry.
Hello, Deborah, are you with us? Hello, Deborah, are you with us? Are you still with us? Okay, I think she was logged out. Please, would like to kindly give her just a few minutes. If she's unable to join back, then we'll take you to presentation. Or can we have somebody else from the group round of presentation? Sorry, can we have someone else from group one round of the presentation on our behalf, which is unable to join in?
Good evening, sir.
Okay.
All right, good
Sorry,
evening.
is she back? Okay. Good evening, sir. I can continue for her. Let me just get this slide.
Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please carry on.
Okay, so she stopped at qualification and skills for a data protection officer. So these are the major ones. There are other relevant skills. The top ones are educational background, knowledge of data protection law and practice, and relevant certification and legal compliance expertise. So yeah, for the educational background, according to our speaker, it said anybody can be a data protection officer. However, law students majorly law students, cybersecurity and computer science are the top for the degree to have this educational background. So another one is knowledge of data protection law and practice. That this is depending on the jurisdiction of the DPO. So in Nigeria, we have the NDPC and other countries have theirs. So the next one is N relevant certification. So we have CIPP, which is Certified Information Privacy Professional. Next one is legal compliance expertise. So the person must have understanding of the role of DPO and must also know the law the relevant law of that particular jurisdiction and how to abide by that law depending on their organization. So other relevant skills, we have communication skills. That means when there are issues, data breach, the DPO can quickly communicate it to the management for quick action to mitigate the effect of the data breach. We also have technical knowledge such as information technology system, data security practice, and others. We have analytical and risk management skill, that is assessment and mitigate risks related to personal data processing. So the DPO must always like have a sense of critical thinking and prompt to be proactive in taking action to ensure that the risks are to the barest minimum. We have project management and organization skill. And lastly, we have training and awareness. That's training of staff within the organization on how to abide by the data protection law of the jurisdiction. So we have DPO appointment process. So for here we have access if DPO is legally required. That's depending on what the NDPC says, especially for large organizations that process sensitive data and other types of data. So DPO is legally required for majorly large organization that handles data and even cross borders data, but for small companies and organization, it's not really mandatory for them. The next one is select qualified independent candidates. The DPO must not hold a position that leads to a conflict of interest, that is the head of IT or legal. So that this simply means that the DPO is an independent office, so he should hold that office and be accountable for his position as the DPO. We have formal appointments in writing and should clearly define the scope of the DPO responsibility, authority, and resources. This is also similar to the earlier point that it should be independent. So his duties should be explicitly stated, his authority and also responsibility in the organization. Next one is notify NDPC or relevant authority. And lastly, we have provide resources and access to top management. So like when he's carrying out maybe the monthly audits within the organization, you should be able to give account of how these data are being processed and controlled. Lastly, now we have best practice, NDPC and EU guideline. So we have the first one is appoint DPO early in compliance journey, ensure DPO reports to senior management, publish DPO contact info, maintain processing records and conduct regular risk assessment. And finally, we have provide regular DPO training and updates. So now in conclusion, a data protection officer is a vital position in an organization which helps to ensure that data it monitors how this data are being processed, how it's stored, how it's managed, and also ensure that the risks are mitigated to the barest minimum in cases where we have data breach. And also for a DPO, he has to like quickly communicate and to the management and ensure that the risks are reduced. So and also in conclusion, every jurisdiction has its data protection law. So based on each jurisdiction, you have to comply to the law stated there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bola, for helping us with what was like the presentation. Well done to both Deborah and Kola and the presentations about one. So please, can we have presentations from book two? But before we do that, we would like to quickly take a picture so that this doesn't get down. So please, if you're in class, kindly turn on the videos. Let's quickly take screenshots of this class and then continue while I also would like to plead with to also get ready for the presentation. So please, can we have Nancy's turn on the videos so that we can take screenshots? All right. Thank you, Naya. Thank you, Paula. Can we have Momentis comply? Thank you as you do. Sorry. All right, so can we have Momentis turn on their videos if you can? Okay. All right, so we are done with that. Thank you for those who applied. So group, if I'm not mistaken, taking presentation from group. So group two, please, can we have your presentation? We are waiting for you. Do we have the presenter in class? If the presenter is not available, can we have the backup presenters make presentation on behalf of the group? Okay, why? Group, so please, we would like to take your presentation now. Can we have someone step into the presentation on behalf of the group? Okay. I don't know why we are unresponsive or not responding. I say that is good too. We will not want to waste any further time. It's why I'm trying to wait for you guys. So what we'll be doing instead is we'll be taking feedback from the mentors. We still have Mr. Matt and Mr. Daniel in class. So we'll be taking feedbacks based on the presentation that was made by one, and then we'll go straight to questions and answers. Right. So back to Mr. Daniel. Yes, if I'm not mistaken. Mr. Daniel, please, we would like to get feedback from you based on the presentation that was made by one. If you have anything you would like to share as regards the work that you did.
Yeah. Thank you, Dennis. So, group one presentation was really insightful. Deborah started with listing the importance of DPO, what's the role of data protection, the importance of compliance. So I want to commend the design of the slide. It's very, very beautiful. And you guys, and I'm sure you guys did like a collective effort. So I'm really impressed, and it's was a very interesting presentation. Also, Bukola also concluded, and she made mention of something that I remember doing back then, where she said, um, you know, you need to, one of the best practices is that data protection officers' contact are supposed to be displayed. So I remember when creating data privacy policies, like, it's one of the requirements from the regulator that the DPO contact should be put in place there. It's very, very vital. If you don't comply with that, it could lead to fine and, penalties from the regulator. So it was very insightful, and thank you guys for, sharing.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Daniel. Mr. Matt, if you're still with us, I would also want to get.
Yeah, I'm still with you. Yeah, I really have to say those were fantastic slides. They look great. Nice and short. I think it captured the essence of the question. I think based on the level of the mentees, I think it was really good. What I would caution against, maybe you guys kind of got really stuck into the qualifications, what it requires, versus the role of the DPO. I don't know if that makes sense. And perhaps maybe, going forward, you want to sort of think about what the presentation is asking for. It was well delivered. We understand with the technical problems that's outside of our control. So well done to Debbie and Bukola. One thing I think I wanted to pick up on there was that interchangeable sort of use of the term data protection officer. So I don't know if some of you have noticed, maybe if you've been on LinkedIn, you've seen some organizations have a DPO, some organizations have a chief privacy officer, some organizations have legal counsel. So I think also it's really important to highlight that the DPO is actually a title which is created by law in most cases, right? And this person is meant to be independent and is meant to report directly into the board. So sort of like the same way legal or general counsel is independent, sometimes the DPO will sit within that function or within the compliance function, but the duty is not to take responsibility for the processing of the personal data. This is the key point. As a DPO, you're not the one who's going to be expected to be accountable for the processing of data. That's done by the business. Maybe your HR is the controller within your organization, the information security, the commercial team, the product team. Those are the guys who are ultimately accountable. As a DPO, your role is to advise the business and to assist them to mitigate and to meet its responsibilities. So it's not you who's on the chopping block or who needs to make sure all these things are in place necessarily, but as a DPO, it's your duty to advise. I don't know if that makes sense. So let's say if you're a DPO, you're different from, let's say, a chief privacy officer who now maybe all those responsibilities are centralized, you're operational. Maybe you, as a privacy officer, you have your engineering guys, your technical guys. So they work with everyone else. Maybe you have some sharp finance guys within the privacy function who work with the guys in finance. Maybe you're responsible for having the HR data managers within that privacy function. Then you will be on the chopping block, but you will not be the DPO. So that's just something I wanted to flag for the benefit of all the mentees.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Mats. All right, saying that we have taken feedbacks from our mentors and we don't have any other mentor who has joined in for the call, we'll be going straight to questions and answers, right? So please, if you're in session today, and we've had, I think, an hour plus, we've been an hour plus already in class, right? Our mentors have shared their own take on today's topic. We've had presentation from group one. We've gotten the opportunity to get different perspective, not just different perspective that converge, right, from both the mentors, the presenters, and everyone who has contributed to class. So please, we'll be taking questions in response to everything that has been said. So if you have a question, something that is a little bit vague for you, a concept that is a little bit vague that you would like to clarify, please, you can go ahead, indicate by the raise of hand. Okay, Fortune, thank you so much. Please, you can go ahead and ask your question.
All right, good afternoon, everybody.
Good evening.
It feels nice to be here. It feels very nice to be. I'm very excited. Okay, my question particularly, I want to actually, it's particularly tailored to Matthew. Okay, I think just within this ending part, he made a very critical point, which I duly noted when he said something about the role or responsibility of a DPO, not being accountable for processing of personal data or being on the chopping block, like somebody who has to bear the brunt of, any stuff to do with data breach. However, his role is to advise, to mitigate, and then to ensure compliance. It's a very striking point that I had to note. So my question is, how can a DPO, that is my question on behalf of Group 2, how can a DPO maintain independence and authority within an organization, especially when data protection decisions may conflict with business interests or executive directives? Should I take it again?
Yeah, Fortune.
Okay.
Shall I wait, or does someone else want to ask another question?
So you can go ahead
Okay,
and
I
answer
wanted
the
to know
question.
the question.
Sorry, I had two voices there. Fortune, is that the end of the question?
Yes. Should I take it again?
No, that's fine. I heard you. Dennis, did you want to say something?
No, not at all.
Okay. I think, Fortune, that's a extremely intelligent question, I must say. And yes, so I think it depends, first of all, we've talked about understanding the jurisdiction and the laws that apply to you. And that understanding is sort of really critical because it's going to inform the sort of level of authority or the level of involvement within the business. Now, in life, as in many things, there's always the theory and the practical. Okay. I would imagine it's sort of maybe similar to how somebody who within a business who's responsible for tax compliance or conflict of interest compliance or gifts. You may, for example, be a compliance officer and you tell the entire business, hey, if any of the clients or any of our salespeople gives you a kickback or gives you a gift or gives you tickets to the football match or gives you a new car, you need to disclose, right? You may also say, well, now we have a gifts and hospitality policy. Nobody is allowed to receive a gift worth more than 20 pounds or 2,000 naira. And if you receive a gift over 2,000 naira, what we will do is we will take it and we'll divide it within the team. You could do all that, but in reality, there will be still some people who will receive tickets and never tell you. They'll never disclose it, right? You may still find people who maybe are having lunch with competitors. Maybe within the compliance function, you said no meetings with competitors. If you know you're meeting with competitors, your CEO could still very much go and meet with a competitor CEO and discuss price collision, for example. Okay, so there's always the theory and there's always the practice. And remember, we've talked a lot, I've talked quite a lot about risk. Now, what you want to do in terms of maintaining that influence is one, remember in my initial run through, I talked about that strategic influence. It's very important, especially in places where, like the GDPR, which explicitly says this person has to be independent and has to report directly into the CEO, right? That you are able to create that strategic influence for the business. But how you protect yourself is the three approaches to risk management. There is the elimination of risk, where you tell your board or your senior management, hey, I've noticed we have a lot of people who print, customer documents because the internet is so unreliable. They put them in their bag, and when they're done, they just leave them on the desk or they just throw them in the bin. It's very easy for somebody to come and pick, right? The CEO says to you, ban that, okay? Let's have a discussion. IT, let's make sure everyone who prints from the printer provide shredders, etc., etc. So that's elimination of the risk. There's mitigating risk, which is, well, there's not much we can do, but we can reduce the effects. So maybe you say, let's take the same scenario. Maybe you say, no one is allowed to print, particularly from this system, because you can do that with an IT system. You can say, when somebody wants to download maybe an Excel sheet of customer contacts and how much maybe they pay for our products, the system will only allow them to print those sheets, but the names will be taken out. They'll be anonymized or pseudonymized, or they'll be randomly changed, right? You can invest in software like that. Of course, that doesn't completely eliminate the risk, because in this day and age, if I'm looking at something on the screen, nothing stops me from snapping a picture. That's the analog gap. But you've mitigated the risk. So if somebody really, really wants to steal personal information, or wants to use it in a way that's not intended, you can say, hey, it's impossible to download. This person was clearly very determined to flout the rules. And then there's acceptance. Your CEO can say, yeah, what can we do? The internet is unreliable. When people are in the field, they need hard copies, and they need all the details. So we're going to accept that risk. We can just hope that our people will be honest. So those three sort of things, and you documenting all that. Everything you do is in writing. Everything you do is a formal communication. It's a memo. So that's sort of how you maintain that level of independence, because you need to say, this is the position of the law. This is what you can and cannot do. But at the end of the day, in the corporate, the commercial environment, money has to be made. So some people have a very high risk appetite. Some people don't. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Matt. And also thank you for your question. Please, do we have more questions from the mentees? Any other person with a question in class? Do we have more questions? No questions from the mentees. No other questions from the mentees. Okay. All right. So if there are no more questions, I think it's safe for us to call it a day on class. So far we've had quite an interesting discourse, and big thanks to our mentors who have helped us due justice to the subject matter for today, and also help us just dictate the flow of the conversation. Thank you so much, Mr. Matt, and also thank you to Mr. Daniel. In absence of any question, I would like to say enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. For the mentees, please do not forget to fill in the attendance for those that were present in class, as well as share, on your different social media platforms what you've learned in today's session. And always do not forget to tag our mentors. You can reach out to them privately. You can reach out to them on their different social media, on LinkedIn rather. Try and connect and reach out to them if you have any questions in regards to maybe today's topic or anything as pertaining data privacy and protection. Once again, good night, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening.